Ave Maria in the Afternoon is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Welcome to Ave Maria in the Afternoon, examining the world through the lens of faith from the heart of the Church to help us navigate the culture. Here's Dr. Marcus Peter.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on this hour of Ave Maria in the Afternoon. I'm Marcus Peter. A video recently surfaced, and if we want to coin the term on social media, or not coin the term, but utilize the term coined on social media, it has gone viral, and it's showing a female Anglican minister concelebrating, I say this in air quotes, concelebrating a mass for the installation of an archbishop in Brazil. Matthew Bunson, Dr. Matthew Bunson joins us, as he does every Thursday, to talk about current events in light of church teachings and church news. I greatly enjoy these conversations because it's so important for us Catholics to keep our fingers on the pulse of what is going on. But in the process of doing so, we have to remember Christ is Lord, His church will always triumph, and so we have to approach these things from a position of hope. Can we get righteous indignation for true injustices? Absolutely. And ultimately understand vengeance is the Lord's, justice is the Lord's. And so we trust it to prayer, knowing that prayer is the strongest, most powerful recourse we can have in facing any evil on this earth. And so that's why we talk about these pieces of news. The other things I want to talk about have to do with National Catholic Register reporting about whether Scotland has really banned private prayer in homes near abortion centers. There have been talks about a law that creates a buffer zone that bans pro-life activities within the vicinity of abortion facilities. And so the speculation here is whether private prayer within homes constitutes the violation of these buffer zones that bans pro-life activity. So we'll talk about all of this with Dr. Matthew Bunson. We go on from there to speak with Mark McMinn. We live in a day of information that comes at us fast. Rapid fire, rapid gratification, instant gratification, fast fingers, fast foods, fast shipping, and, it just goes on. And so the human beings are triggered into this constant fight or flight impulse. It keeps us on high alert. Mobile devices, especially social media platforms, are triggered and designed to make sure that human beings are kept in that mode. And so this can easily interfere with the work of contemplation and living a truly human and a life that's transcendent in God. And so we talk about all of this with Mark McMinn after the headlines.
Thank you, Marcus, and good afternoon, everyone. This is your Ave Maria Radio News for Thursday, February 20th. It's the feast of Saints Francisco and Jacinta Marto. And today's news is brought to you by Visiting Angels, providing loving care and assistance for seniors in need at visitingangels.com. Some Republican senators are pushing back on President Trump's claim that Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is a dictator. On Wednesday, Trump called Zelensky a dictator without elections and said he better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Some Republican senators, however, say they do not think Zelensky is a dictator, including Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and John Cornyn of Texas. Hamas handed over the bodies of 4 dead Israeli hostages today, including 2 children, ages 4 and 9 months, and their mother. They were kidnapped on October 7, 2023, during the Hamas attack on Israel. The Palestinian militant group said the children and their mother were killed in an Israeli airstrike in 2023. The IRS is preparing to lay off some 6,000 employees starting today. This comes at the busiest time of the year for the tax collecting agency. The IRS will be primarily letting go of probationary workers as part of the Trump administration's efforts to reduce the federal government workforce. And the United States and Canada will meet tonight in the final of the NHL's 4-nation face-off in Boston. The U.S. took down Canada on Saturday 3-1 in round-robin play. That game saw 3 fights between the two teams in the first 9 seconds of play. Ticket reseller TickPick says the cheapest tickets for tonight's game are going for around $1,200. The puck drop is set for 8 p.m. Eastern. From the Ave Maria Radio.net news desk, I'm Dan McGraw.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Over the break, I received this piece of news from my executive producer. A terror attack has rocked Israel. It just happened. 3 buses have reportedly exploded. Fox News reported, the report I'm looking at is from Fox News, and 2 buses in a parking lot were reportedly exploded in Israel on Thursday night, and this appears to have been another terrorist attack. We are awaiting further information. Let's continue to pray for circumstances and situations in the Middle East, to pray for peaceful resolution and the cessation of terrorist attacks and terrorist attempts in that area. Now, joining me to have a conversation on church news, current events in light of church teaching, is my friend Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President, Editorial Director of EWTN News. Matthew, thank you so much for making the time. How are you?
Very good to be with you. It's obviously been a busy week for everyone in news. Pope Francis's health has been a major concern.
Oh, boy, yes.
I think I can speak for all of us when I say that he has been most definitely in our prayers. And then, of course, there's the Trump administration that's keeping everyone very busy as well. So this is certainly a fascinating time to be residing and working in Washington, D.C., but also to be a Catholic journalist.
Yep, truly. I want to say kudos to the National Catholic Register and you personally as well in light of your coverage of the Pope's present health issues and the treatment he's getting, because, gosh, when people start speculating on social media,
yes,
I saw memes flying around that some official media bodies in different countries have taken up without bothering to verify if the quotes and the claims were accurate or valid.
Oh, that's right. And I don't want to. One particular outlet that has a very high, just say, virtual presence, based in New York, went so far as to list possible successors to Pope Francis a day or so ago, which strikes me as not just a little premature, but also the best way I can put it is rather boorish.
Yeah,
it's just unseemly to be engaging in that type of speculation. But also, this isn't the time for it. And one of the tasks, and you've hit on something I think really important, Marcus, and that is that you need to be very careful where your nourishment is coming from when it comes to news like this, because there is so much speculation.
Yeah.
And certain stories can be spun in whatever direction various outlets want to take them. There's also the natural inclination to approach things negatively or with high drama. Which tends also to increase speculation further as to the actual state of the Holy Father's health.
Yeah, and I sometimes wonder if I so much as came up with the most outlandish piece of news possible and just posted it on my social media feed, if it would go like wildfire because people wouldn't bother to fact check it. But that's just speculation.
Well, you would have a lot of hits, but you wouldn't be able to sleep at night.
Exactly, but that's the point that you're making, that we as Catholics have to be concerned about. We have to fact check the fact checkers. And in light of that, let's talk about a female minister concelebrating a mass in Brazil.
Well, this is the type of story that, again, when you read it, it seems so preposterous that it can't possibly be true. And yet, here we are. Essentially, the installation mass in Brazil was attended by an Anglican minister. And it just gets weirder from there. Why? Because the minister in question, part of the Anglican Episcopal Church in Brazil, apparently, quote, concelebrated Mass with all of the other priests for the installation of the Archbishop in the Archdiocese of Chapeco in Brazil. So this is not just an unseemly event. It is actually a violation of canon law. It is completely inappropriate in terms of liturgical law, liturgical practice. And to make it worse, this priestess or minister, her name is Vivian Schwanke de Oliveira, was wearing an alb, a blue stole, and went through the procession, remained on the sanctuary, participated in the consecration of the Eucharist, and then received communion. So I'll leave it to the canonists in the audience to decide just how many violations there are of that. But I think we can start with Canon 908, that stipulates very specifically that priests are simply forbidden to concelebrate the Eucharist with priests or ministers of churches or ecclesial communities of which he belongs, who are not in full communion with the church. It's really that straightforward.
Yeah. From what I've read, and I'm just not going to watch this video because there's enough reporting on it, but from what I've read, this person was also involved in the distribution of communion, and I'm willing to stand corrected on this. But then you've got further violations, right? Canon 844 in terms of
exactly.
Administration of the sacraments and just liturgical experimentation has been one of those beasts that the popes in my life, at least. John Paul II, Benedict XVI, Francis, they have constantly tried to battle. And it's horrendous. And this is done under the guise of ecumenism, but in reality it causes more fracturing and division because it's direct canonical violations. There's nothing unifying about this.
Right, exactly. And it's also the situation that we see from time to time. I'm happy to say that I don't think it occurs on a very, very regular basis, but these types of aberrations and violations of church law, liturgical practice, liturgical law do happen. But what is for a lot of Catholics very frustrating is that they take place. Everyone is outraged. There's an initial statement that seems a little vague. More protests follow, and followed then by, we're committed to good doctrine. Now, I will say that the Portuguese language news partner for EWTN News, and that's Aussie Digital, did reach out to the Archdiocese in this case, asking, could you please explain exactly what happened here? Why you have an Anglican minister participating in apparently trying to concelebrate, note I say try because he's not empowered to do so, and then receiving communion. And the response was that this event happened during the solemn mass of installation of the Archdiocese, and this is from the Archbishop himself, and his installation as Metropolitan Archbishop. We inform you that we have already communicated with the Apostolic Nunciature in Brazil regarding the circumstances, again, of this isolated incident of inadvertent violation of liturgical norms. It seems pretty obvious that there was something happening there to anyone who was there, but then it included a recommitment to doctrinal orthodoxy and liturgical orthopraxy. In other words, we're going to strive to be faithful to the teachings of the Church and also to liturgical practice, and we will strive to avoid future errors, which is a similar type of statement that we frequently hear after violations of this type.
So it's a standard canonical statement of this is where we're striving to be. We can acknowledge that there was some error or some abuse or some violation of canon law. It wasn't helped by the fact that this was very cognizant on the part of the Archbishop of Chapeco because he made a statement of the ecumenical significance of the presence of...
That's right.
So this was publicly acknowledged. This wasn't something that was surreptitiously done. And so there's a reality of public scandal to the faith of the lay faithful.
That's right. And anyone who has seen any footage of this or photos of this, the presence of this minister, especially with her blue stole, you can't miss it. Yeah. So there's no possible way that she might have been mistaken for a Catholic priest up on the altar. Certainly the gender would be wrong, starting with that. So for profanations and assurances of inadvertence and ignorance, I think for a lot of people are going to be unsatisfactory.
Yeah. And that's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
My guest, Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President, Editorial Director of EWTN News. We're talking about current events in light of church teachings and church news. We just covered the issue of an Anglican minister on the altar during the installation of a celebration of an archbishop, installation of a Catholic archbishop. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
Support for this Ave Maria radio program comes in part by the non-for-profit St. Anthony Services. Are you shopping for mortgage products, Catholic investing, Catholic health, real estate, or estate planning? StAnthonyServices.org can help you find a Catholic professional for these needs. They regularly connect faithful citizens with faith-based professionals that share our Christian values. More information at StAnthonyServices.org or 877-LIFE-US1.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866 Ave Maria or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Hello, Steve Ray here. We're going to Normandy, France in November to celebrate the 80th anniversary of D-Day. We'll also be in Paris for the opening of the resurrected Notre Dame Cathedral. Join us on a pilgrimage of discovery through the saints and shrines of France. Catherine Labourier and the Miraculous Medal, St. Therese of Lisieux, the incorrupt body of Vincent de Paul, a dinner cruise through Paris on the Seine River, and so much more.
Find the Ave Maria Radio travel tab at AveMariaRadio.net.
Underwritten in part by the following nonprofit.
Are you paying high prices with a traditional health insurance company that pays for things that violate your conscience? There's an alternative available. Solidarity HealthShare is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services, all while saving you money with prices starting as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. Never fund another abortion with your healthcare dollars. Call 844-313-4999 to learn more.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. My guest, Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President, Editorial Director of EWTN News. We are talking about church news. And I greatly enjoy our Thursday exchanges, Matthew. I will say...
Likewise.
I will say, though, I think you and I do a good job of keeping each other hopeful because, gosh, it would be far too easy to just walk around morose and disappointed at the constant news that we have to talk about. It's never a dull moment.
No, there isn't. And certainly we're heartened by the news about Pope Francis. The latest bulletin, I'm sure you've shared this, is that they're, according to the Vatican statement from the Bulletino from what would be this afternoon, from this evening, Rome time, is that his condition is slightly improving. The Vatican always uses fascinating language. They use the phrase hemodynamic parameters, which we're assuming refers to some of his blood work. That he's stable.
But Matthew, that's too easy to say, though.
Yes, of course. So in that sense, we've got statements from Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, who saw him yesterday, who said that his sense of humor is still there. So all indications are that he's certainly stable. But again, he's 88, so that's something that has to be kept in mind, and a host of underlying medical conditions and medical issues that are, as the Vatican statements have said, and the doctors have said, that it's a complicated type of treatment. Then, as we were also talking right at the top of our conversation this afternoon, we have the barrage of Trump administration actions, executive orders, appointments, confirmations, and there's a lot to digest there as well. So let's just say that coming on to have our conversations, it's always fun because I think we're able to cover so much ground, but we do so, at least you and I are having fun.
Yep, we truly are. And so in light of what we would otherwise consider to be a ludicrous violation of freedom of conscience, the legal crackdown on pro-life expression in the UK, particularly with regard to Scotland. So the claim by J.D. Vance about private prayer within their own homes, violating a law about the buffer zone banning pro-life activities within a certain region of abortion facilities. I understand, a bit of a stretch, but not entirely ludicrous when you think about the fact that you can be brought up charges for privately praying within your own head within vicinity of these places.
Well, that's right. And we can add to that, that I think it was just yesterday, the 74-year-old grandmother was arrested for silently praying near, in the vicinity of an abortion clinic. So it raises the obvious specter, which has been much discussed for a while now, of thought crimes, that you are somehow guilty of thoughts that might be in violation of a law. And all of this stems from the decision on the part of the Scottish government, and we're seeing similar things in England with very clear laws along the same lines that prohibit prayer of any kind within certain distances of abortion clinics. For people in the United States, this is almost unthinkable, but certainly we have seen in the last 4 years similar efforts to impose bans and to arrest people under the FACE Act. So it's not completely unheard of. Now, the question, though, that came up related to what J.D. Vance, the vice president, said at the Munich Security Conference. And this is one example within a host. He gave sort of a cornucopia of concerns from what he described as the retreat of Europe from what we all can agree should be shared democratic values. And he listed, again, a variety of violations. And then came to Scotland. And the point he was making about Scotland was that there is the possibility, and certainly his interpretation of this law, that those who live near abortion facilities might be in violation of the buffer zone, even in private prayer within their own homes.
Right.
Now, I think you used a key word, and that is it seems a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect to it. But there are differing opinions on this. Certainly the Scottish government tried to respond as quickly as possible, that no such thing is in the works or would be part of the Safe Access Zones law that came into effect, I think, last September regarding silent vigils and other things.
Right.
But at the same time, as they say in their own statements, the list of possible violations is not exhaustive, and enforcement agencies will reach their own decisions on whether an offense has been committed. Well, once you have, let's just say, less than clearly defined ways of interpreting a law, anything is possible.
And therein lies the issue, right? So a stretch in terms of speculation, but like I said, and you just rightly pointed out, not out of the bounds of reason for us to propose, because it's not been so clearly defined, and without those bounds, this kind of speculation can lend itself to credibility eventually.
Well, that's right.
Oh, go ahead, please.
And there was a letter from the Scottish government that was posted on social media by the Alliance Defending Freedom International on behalf of the pro-life people. And it made the point that activities in private places, such as a house within the area between the protected premises and the boundary of a zone, could be an offense if they can be seen or heard within the zone and are done intentionally or recklessly. Now, some would interpret that as prayer within your own private home, but obviously from the government's interpretation, it would be if you're too loud. Now, again, who decides what's too loud and what crosses the line? Rather than making the obvious thing that would be more akin to the American approach that is upheld in terms of First Amendment rights, that you do have a right to have free speech. And yet, that's certainly, it's a different judicial tradition, it's a different legal system, so we certainly recognize that. But from an American standpoint, this is most certainly a violation of conscience protections and freedom of speech.
Yep, and it's alarming, and this is why conversations on freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, and ultimately the dignity of the human person and liberty are ones that we have to continue to have so that we can preserve the rights of democratic, republic, free nations, and therefore the freedom of expression of religion.
Well, and as we have seen, too, that this is not a phenomenon unique to Scotland.
Yep.
Increasingly, you find it in England, again, where individuals like Isabel von Spruce and others are facing real challenges legally because of these apparent thought crimes. Mm-hmm. But this is also something that we're seeing consistently now across most of the EU. For example, in the Netherlands, in Finland, and elsewhere, where you can be brought up on charges, even just quoting scripture when it comes to things like homosexual acts. So you've got that as a dimension. And then, as we saw on CBS's show 60 Minutes over just this last weekend, a kind of glowing interview with various officials charged with deciding what is hate speech in social media. And at no point was the question asked, why do you need this? But also, what are the parameters? How far can you go with this? And who, and this to my mind is key, makes the decision about what constitutes a hate crime? It's very subjective in its application. And I think this is raising fears of, certainly the claim that was made throughout the 24 election here in the United States of at least a claim again, of a two-tiered justice system that they see in places like England and increasingly in the United States.
Yeah. And speaking about such violations, the Democratic Republic of Congo, we just received news that 70 Christians were beheaded in church, and we'll talk more about this in a later segment. Matthew, thank you very much for making the time to speak with us.
Great to be with you. Let's keep the Holy Father in prayer.
Amen. My guest, Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President, Editorial Director of EWTN News. We've been talking about current events in light of church teachings, church news. I'll cover something in the beginning of the other segment after this. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
When your children consider going to college, where are you going to find a place that will prepare them for the future and build on the foundation that you've laid? The answer? Ave Maria University. With an authentically Catholic curriculum, including 35 majors, AMU prepares students to take on the world.
I've seen the difference in my son since he's been at Ave Maria. He's happy, he's excited about what he's going to do with his degree, and he's living his faith.
Learn more at avemaria.edu. That's avemaria.edu. Ave Maria School of Law is the Roman Catholic law school in the United States. Consistently ranked in the Princeton Review as one of the best and most conservative law schools, as well as pre-law's most devout law school. Ave Maria School of Law provides a traditional legal education while emphasizing how the law intersects with the Catholic intellectual tradition and natural law philosophy. Ave Maria School of Law, unabashedly Catholic, consistently excellent. For more information, visit avemarialaw.edu.
He was a pope, a saint, and a doctor of the Church.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
Pope St. Gregory I the Great is one of only 4 popes honored as the Great. Among his many achievements was sending missionaries across Northern Europe, especially St. Augustine of Canterbury, who brought Christ to the people of England. In a pun, Pope Gregory called the English people angels. He died in 604.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
St. Therese once told her sister Celine that when we trust ourselves and not God, our soul becomes barren and incapable of virtue. Her remedy? External works of charity. We all try to do it on our own sometimes without asking for God's help. At St. Paul Evangelization, we suggest sharing the gospel with someone who needs it. Check out streetevangelization.com to find a team near you where you can share the love of Jesus. If there isn't one in your area yet, perhaps God is calling you to start a team in your city. To learn more, visit streetevangelization.com.
Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo.
Americans are curious about the religious devotion of others and are willing to discuss the topic, but most say they rarely have conversations about faith with their Christian friends. A study by Lifeway Research finding Americans are widely receptive to spiritual conversations in a variety of settings. Now, perhaps more than ever, people are open to conversions about faith, yet few Christians actually take the opportunity to engage in personal evangelism. The reason conversations are not happening about the Christian faith is that Christians are not bringing it up. And I think this is key. Now, this person is not saying we shouldn't be concerned about religious liberty in the sense of, yes, there is great persecution out there. But at the end of the day, it is about the fact that we're not doing enough talking about Jesus.
Catholic Connections, Teresa Tomeo. Weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern, on EWTN Radio.
Sin creates a proclivity to sin, the Catholic Catechism teaches. It develops vice by repetition of the same wrong act. Thus, sin tends to reinforce and reproduce itself. Vice can be linked to the capital sins, which are called capital because they can engender other sins and other vices. The capital sins are pride, avarice, envy, wrath, lust, gluttony, and sloth. Sin is a personal act, but we can also be responsible for the sins of others under certain conditions. Sin can make men accomplices of one another, the Catechism warns, causing concupiscence, violence, and injustice to reign among them. This is Peggy Stanton, and this has been the Order of Malta's Minute with the Catechism.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Pete. Before we begin this segment, this was brought to my attention toward the end of the last segment, and so I want to make sure I mention this. 70 Christians were found beheaded in a church in the war-torn Democratic Republic of Congo. And Open Doors reported the story. It's on Newsweek right now. And the 70 decapitated bodies were discovered in a Protestant church in Kasanga. And while no group has taken responsibility, there's speculation that the Allied Democratic Forces, they're suspected to have committed this atrocity. And they're an Islamic group. They're out of Uganda. They're affiliated with ISIS, the Islamic State. And so they're an Islamic supremacist jihadist organization. And so 70 is an alarming number, to be sure. These victims, they'd been tied up and decapitated with knives. They'd been kidnapped on February the 12th, and all of their bodies were just discovered. So please pray for their souls, pray for the Democratic Republic of Congo, pray for the protection of Christians across the world, because whether we like it or not, the fact is Christians are, without a doubt, the most persecuted demographic presently in present global conditions. Moving on to the conversation we're going to have. We live in a day of fast information, fast fingers, fast food, fast shipping, and Mark McMinn wants to draw our attention to the fact that God invites us to slow down. We are always living in a state of fight or flight, and God's truly inviting us to slow down. Mark is the author of An Invitation to Slow, Resist the Speed of Now, Make Space for Quiet, and Cultivate an Intentional Life. Mark is also Professor of Psychology and Director of Integration in the Graduate Department of Clinical Psychology at George Fox University in Newberg, Oregon. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me on, Peter. My heart just hurts for what you just described about what's happening in Congo. I'm so sorry to hear that.
I know this was given to me during 2 breaks ago in this program, and I'm jarred by it. I guess the number is jarring, let alone the nature of the atrocity. It's horrific to say the least, but it's consistent of the pattern of persecution of Christians across the world. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for having me on.
So, in light of the fact that we're always hit with a barrage of information, including sometimes despair-inducing information, which we Christians are cautioned against, God's invitation for us is to slow down and to reconnect with the transcendental, with the divine, and to contemplate. Now, Mark, in your work, you're going to be the first to admit this, and I'm also going to admit that's a tall order. That's a tremendously difficult thing to do, given the nature of the life that we have been given and built in modernity right now.
Absolutely. I often use an analogy here. I think about sitting with a friend at a restaurant trying to have a good conversation, and there's a car in the parking lot with the alarm going off, and it's just blaring. Time after time after time, and it makes it really hard to have that conversation because there's all this background noise. Well, doesn't it seem like right now in the world around us, there's just a lot of alarms blaring? It makes it really hard to have intentional sort of relationship with God or with one another because of just the noise, the loudness, the vitriol, the anger, the judgment, just everything that's going on around us.
Yep. And in the light of all this, you bring up two crucial points in your work of clinical psychology that you constantly engage, or at least two crucial pieces of information we need to know about, which is the sympathetic and therefore the parasympathetic nervous system. For the sake of our listeners, just explain what these are, because these concepts are going to be applied in our conversation.
Right. So if I have you finish the sentence and I say lions and tigers and bears, and you say, and we all know what to say there, because that is the fight or flight sympathetic nervous system that we have. It's the alarm system that tells us when something is scary, we need to get extra oxygen to our lungs. We need to have our pupils dilate so we can bring in more light. We need to have our heart race faster so we can get oxygen into our body. This is the sympathetic nervous system. And then the parasympathetic nervous system, that's what calms us down and it helps us relax. And the way that, it's a very amazing, intricate system that we have in our bodies, but the way it's designed is that those both should go back and forth, that we should always have that calming reflex after the excitement of the lions and tigers and bears. But again, right now in our world, it feels like, we're just constantly getting noises on our watch alerting us to the newest catastrophe. There's so much alarm in the world right now. And so the invitation in this book and an invitation to slow is to yes, recognize that these are hard times. There's a lot going on, but can we draw on ancient spiritual practices to slow us down, to bring us back to center? My wife, who wrote the book with me, is a spiritual director. So I come at it as a psychologist. She's a spiritual director, and we partner together in the book to sort of think about what's going on in our particular current age and how do we slow it down? How do we bring it back to some place of calm?
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the core of it, because even if we try not to be too academic about the enterprise, the practicality of it, the very thought of the practicality of it, it can by itself induce a kind of anxiety because we're so used to operating at the level of the sympathetic nervous system. For many of us, we've been born into this. The digital revolution has been most of our lives. For everyone alive right now, it's been most of our lives. And shifting from that gear means going against a current that's been set for us.
That's right. And technology, while it has brought many amazing gifts to us, it has also made it more complicated. Like, imagine in decades, centuries gone by, where maybe there would be some bad thing that would happen, and a messenger would bring it to the village, and everyone would grieve, and they would feel the tragedy of it. And then days would go by before another messenger came with more bad news. There would be lots of time to sort of readjust, to refocus, to build community again. Now it's just moment by moment. We're just constantly getting barraged with the bad news, and we're constantly in that alarm mode. And it takes a lot of intentionality to see if we can deliberately find ways to refocus, to come back to what we know is centering and grounding in our life.
Yeah, and that perhaps is the hardest part of all of this, because this centering, this grounding, it necessitates effort on our part to be very conscious. Because this language of Psalm 46:10, right, be still and know that I am God, is at the core of this. God wants us to be human persons, and so human persons are meant to flourish. We are meant to live liberal lives of even enjoyment, fine art, fine music, and the only way we can do that is to stop from what John Paul II called this kind of tyranny of efficiency that we've all been fed with our bread and butter.
That's so well said. Oh yeah, I come as a bit of an outsider here. I'm a Quaker, which is another contemplative tradition. But almost every one of the spiritual exercises that we bring into the book on An Invitation to Slow comes out of your Catholic tradition. There are just such rich resources in Catholic tradition around spiritual practices that help people slow.
Right.
It's a beautiful resource that you have in your Catholic Church to think about ways to invite slowness.
I appreciate you saying that. I'm a convert as well, and coming into the Catholic Church, one of the things I did notice was exactly this, that there doesn't seem to me another Christian tradition that's done the work of this being a school of prayer and contemplative prayer and teaching people how to pray well. And so a big part of this invitation to slow comes from that. So thank you for sharing that, because it echoes my own experience in coming into the church. My guest, Mark McMinn, Professor of Psychology, Director of Integration in the Graduate Department of Clinical Psychology at George Fox University in Newberg, Oregon. And he's the author, with his bride Lisa Graham, of An Invitation to Slow Down and Experience God. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. I'm Marcus Peter.
When your children consider going to college, where are you going to find a place that will prepare them for the future and build on the foundation that you've laid? The answer? Ave Maria University. With an authentically Catholic curriculum, including 35 majors, AMU prepares students to take on the world.
My daughter told me she was published in a scientific journal as an undergrad. I'm so proud of her. The world needs Catholic physicists, and my daughter's going to be one of them.
Learn more at avemaria.edu. That's avemaria.edu.
Ave Maria in the Afternoon is underwritten by the following nonprofit organization: Real Estate for Life. Buying or selling your home or business property? Real Estate for Life can connect you with one of 1,400 pro-life real estate agents around the world. When Real Estate for Life receives a referral fee, they donate 70% to Ave Maria Radio and Human Life International. More information at realestateforlife.org or 877-LIFE-US1. That's realestateforlife.org.
Italy aficionado Teresa Tomio's newest book is now out on the Ave Maria online store. In Italy's Shrines and Wonders, Teresa Tomio provides how best to navigate the most popular sites, best routes, and how to best to soak in all the beauty Italy has to offer. She also shares the most inspiring journeys to make your Italy excursion utterly unforgettable. Italy's Shrines and Wonders from Catholic Connections Teresa Tomio can be purchased at AveMariaRadio.net.
This program brought to you in part by Ave Maria, Florida, a big kind of small town where golf carts take you everywhere and there's always something fun around the corner. Discover championship golf, resort-style amenities, and a town center full of shopping and dining. With Ave Maria University and Ave Maria Catholic Church at its heart, it's a community full of connection and charm. More than 25 model homes are available for viewing. More information can be found at avemaria.com. That's avemaria.com.
60 on 10 with Monsignor Charles Pope.
The seventh commandment, you shall not steal. The seventh commandment forbids theft, that is, unjustly taking or keeping another's property against the reasonable will of the owner. It also prohibits deliberate retention of goods lent or of objects lost. It prohibits business fraud, paying unjust wages, forcing up prices, and taking advantage of the ignorance or the hardship of another person. It prohibits the appropriation and use for private purposes of common goods. Also, work poorly done, tax evasion, forgery of checks, invoices, excessive expenses, and waste. Under the seventh commandment is also tucked our social justice teachings, because if I have two coats, one of them belongs to the poor, and I reasonably ought to give what belongs to them, because God gave all the goods of this world for all the people of this world.
For more about the Ten Commandments, visit EWTNRC.com.
It's time for Family Man with Dr. Gregory Popchak.
Good family discussions don't just happen, they take time. Family talk rituals help families be intentional about making real conversations happen. You need to be intentional if you want to get past exchanges like, "What'd you do in school today?" "Nothing." Believe it or not, when the relationship between parents and kids is healthy, kids naturally want to open up to mom and dad. Kids want to know that their parents care enough to take time to listen and to understand how they're feeling and what they're going through. When parents make time to listen first, kids are more likely to willingly receive what mom and dad have to say. That's why family talk rituals are an important part of Catholic family life. To discover more ways your family can celebrate the liturgy of domestic church life, check out the newest editions of Parenting with Grace and visit CatholicCounselors.com. I'm Dr. Greg Popchak, but you can call me family man.
To discover more ways faith can enrich your life, visit CatholicCounselors.com.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. My guest, Mark McMinn, Professor of Psychology and Director of Integration in the Graduate Department of Clinical Psychology at George Fox University in Oregon. We are talking about his book, An Invitation to Slow. He and his bride co-wrote this book, and it's about resisting getting swept up in a speedy, hasty life. Now, from a scientific perspective, just from a clinical perspective, Mark, one of there are numerous benefits, you list them in the book, to slowing down, to not living in a constant fight or flight mode that many of us listening right now are just so accustomed to. Just talk about that a little bit. Why shouldn't we just always stimulate our sympathetic nervous system and function that way?
Right. Well, I often wish that we could have the table of contents on the front of the book, because the title, An Invitation to Slow, while that is characteristic of the book, it doesn't really give much detail. So in the table of contents, we get to the question you're asking. We have some chapters on slow to fear, slow to anger, slow to judge, and each of those come with an invitation to courage, an invitation to empathy, an invitation to humility. So what we're wanting to do is sort of replicate the natural way that our bodies are created, that when we get in this agitated state, and we will, because we live in a world where things can be agitating, what we then need to do is we need to enter into spaces of calm, to slow this down. And from a clinical perspective, our bodies are just not made to be agitated all the time. It's one of the things that will lead to all sorts of physical problems as well as mental health problems. We need to have slower times to punctuate the times of agitation in our lives.
Yep, and that's at the heart of this, that God wants to adopt us as children of his family. And so he's a father, and no father wants for his children to live in a state of constant anxiety. And so even taking a look at these invitations, slow to speak, an invitation to quiet, slow to grasp, an invitation to contentment. By the way, I saw immediately what you were doing in the chapters, and I really appreciate it, because we're not just running away from something, we're running toward something. And in this case, we're running toward the assurance of the faith and calm and certitude and providence and protection we can find in the love of God.
Exactly. One of the ones to highlight right now, I think, is the final chapter, which we call Slow to Isolate, an invitation to community, because we are in the midst of what former U.S. Surgeon General has called a loneliness epidemic. And if you look at the data on this, it is really humbling. There's just so much isolation and loneliness in the world right now. We need to be in community. And there's solid research that shows that people who attend church regularly have fewer health problems. They live on the average 7 years longer than those who don't. I mean, there's so much evidence that shows we are made for community, for connection. And we live in a world right now that's hard to find. So can we come back and we slow down, enter back into relationships, into community, and be together, which is how we're created to be.
And this notion of being in community is necessitated by forming meaningful connections. A community isn't something that causes a bond on the surface level. We're not just gathering together to play, say, paintball or laser tag. There's a depth here at play that becomes the crux and heart of this community. And typically it's the kind of environment that fosters growth in virtue. And so there's a shared common purpose. And so the height of this is a shared faith in a God who calls you to a particular purpose. And that's where you find the most benefit in community.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's so many examples of this. At the beginning of COVID, this little church, a little country church that my wife and I attend, at the beginning of COVID, one of our pastors somehow had a surplus of toilet paper. Do you remember how there was this panic buying and nobody could find toilet paper anywhere? Our pastor posted on our listserv that he had extra toilet paper and he'd come deliver it to our houses if we wanted. I think who gets to have something like that in the world? Well, it's people that are part of communities.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that's not in his job description to distribute toilet paper to the parishioners, but it's a classic example of how community can come together at the darkest times of life and provide these sort of practical, tangible needs that people have in the world.
Yeah. And in a lot of my work, I study the ebbs and flows of culture and history and the Christian undercurrent and all of this. And one of the things I have found until the digital revolution specifically, and really you start tracking this from television entertainment onwards, you see that societies were formed with pillars, and it was typically the church that was the community center of. So there were numerous churches, and so these numerous churches became numerous pillars that built the community structure of that society. We've lost that, and social media has attempted to fill that void. But as you rightly note in this chapter, it does leave you feeling more isolated than before, because we can't turn to a digital counterfeit and hope that it satisfies and, as you use the word nourish here, nourishes our souls with that need for community and true meaningful human connection.
It's just different, isn't it? I mean, there's lots of good things to say about our digital world, but it's a different kind of connection, and it's not the one that our hearts long for the most. So yes to what you're working on. You know, it's interesting historically, you probably know all about this, but the word loneliness doesn't really even show up as a problem until about 200 years ago. It's like before that, when people were more consistently part of religious communities, the word was oneliness, and it was actually a positive thing, like being solitude. And then around the time 1800 comes around, the word loneliness starts showing up in the literature, and by the time we see the Victorian literature, it's like a very common thing, people suffering in their loneliness, and now we see it more than ever.
Yep. And this shift in culture is marked in a very specific way by solitude is a good thing as an expression of connecting with the divine, because you're never truly alone. God is still with you because he's actively holding you in being. And so you have a kind of communion you can have with God. But when you take that out of the picture, solitude very quickly becomes loneliness. And so the epidemic of loneliness that we're seeing, that you rightly highlight, is because ultimately we're disconnected from the one who holds us in being and who calls us to primary community and communion with him.
Exactly. And you know, when we do have times of solitude now, it's so tempting to pick up the phone and check our email. The average American adult checks email every 4 minutes. So even there's this intrusion onto our times of solitude from technology, which again has some good things to it, but it also has a downside, and we try to explore that some in an invitation to slow.
I'm so guilty of that. The email checking, constantly checking emails. It's an occupational hazard, and it's a living hazard.
Yes.
So
it's so easy to do.
Yeah. So considering that then, and this great issue of isolation, just talk more about the irony of the fact that social media and digital technology has promised connectivity, and yet we are seeing statistics of more people reporting isolation and loneliness skyrocketing now more than ever. You see this at a clinical level in your practice. Your bride sees this in spiritual direction, and we see this in the work in our apostolate. So clearly something is not connecting here, and we have an obligation to understand why that is.
Absolutely, and there's been a lot of good research on this. It seems like 2012 was an inflection point. It was a great year for technology. There were a lot of new things developed. But if you look at the graphs on loneliness, especially among teenage girls, the loneliness just increases so much from 2012 forward. And so there's something about the technologies that are intended to bring us together, to have us connected all the time. There's something that's happening here that's actually making us more isolated. And the answer, of course, is community, finding ways to be back together, in the room together, face to face, being with one another, and especially faith communities, as you were mentioning a moment ago, where there's actually a reason to be together, a sort of deep meeting of the longings that we bring into life.
Right. And just to comment a little deeper on this issue that, like you mentioned, young women are experiencing, with the rise of digital technology, we've also seen a rise in what Rene Girard called mimetic desire. It simply means comparison being the thief of joy. We look at these social media presentations of people's lives, and they're always whitewashed, they're always saccharine, and they never actually reflect the reality of that person's life. And so that innate, almost envious desire arises. I want what they have. And because I can't have that, the spiral into anywhere from loneliness to self-loathing, condemnation, skyrockets as a result. And so you're dealing with this in your practice. But one way in which you recommend in your book we can remedy this is by developing real habits of being grateful.
Exactly. We have a chapter called Slow to Envy, an invitation to gratitude. And you're right. You open up social media, and what are you faced with? All the great things. Your friend that's going to Italy, and your friend that just wrote the first book, and the fascination of new love that another friend has. And you open up social media, you get the sense that everyone else has this amazing life.
Right.
And it's really easy to slip into envy, feeling like, oh, I should be like this or like that. Of course, we're all just putting our best face onto social media, so it's a deceptive sense, but it's still very powerful.
Yep, and that's the thing. The deceptiveness of that reality can grip us if we don't have a grounding that's greater.
Right, exactly. And that's the invitation to gratitude. Gratitude found in God, gratitude found in faith, in our community traditions. Absolutely.
Mark, I want to say thank you very much for making the time to speak with us. This was enlightening and sobering for me as well, so I have no doubt many of our listeners benefited from it.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Marcus. I love your show.
Thank you. My guest, Mark McMinn, Professor of Psychology, Director of Integration in the Graduate Department of Clinical Psychology at George Fox University in Oregon. And we've been talking about a book he and his bride co-authored entitled An Invitation to Slow. My exhortation, let's slow down today. Let's try to experience God and each other. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.